is so important in a desperate last day. Impulsive decision making, emotion minded, emotion driven decisions a lot of the times override your judgment, self education, and delay around making important decisions. Identity is at the root of this, where as men, we tend to highlight our anchor, our sense of self esteem and self confidence on temporary pleasures, purchases, validation from others, rather than anchoring our true selves and our love for ourselves in conditions that are everlasting, such as your value system, your principles. In these times, in the world that we are living in, it is a dog eats dog world. Survival of the fittest, self preservation is the first order. And with the invention of the imagination going wrong, this thing called racism, in groups are going to prioritize their group interests more than ever. People are hurting financially, emotionally, coming from traumatic experiences within their own families. And the power of discernment is more valuable than ever. We live in an era where choices come fast and pressure feels constant. Phone ads, algorithms, social feeds, voices in the marketplace, and emotional needs all push us towards decisions that feel urgent, desirable, or necessary. You can't look at anything electronic these days, commercials, scrolling through social media websites without seeing some form of advertisement. The only communication in this world is marketing. You may not hear a word from your neighbor around your health. Maybe you're battling with a severe mental illness or physical health issue, almost pulling teeth to get people to acknowledge you, right? Just to reach out and check in on you. But you better believe if there's a sale that has to be made or a need, a part of this thing called capitalism, oh, your phone is going to ring off the hook. Discernment. Not all urgency is wisdom, and not every opportunity is what it seems. In such an environment, making choices without clear thinking leads many people into hidden cost, compounding debt, bad relationships, and life detours they never even planned for. You see this a lot with young men rushing into relationships with women who aren't even a part of their destiny, not even a part of their plan. It ends up being invited into their destiny because leave it up to them, they're going to get this situation regardless of whatever we think, and not even understanding the hidden cost. Child support is more than just responsibility for your children. That's a given. But a lot of times when the court has to enforce it, or there has to be strategies in place where women use this to their advantage, in a lot of cases where the man will be open to paying child support, the hidden costs of rushing into situations, rushing into relationships with people where there's misalignment. Biblically, we are called to address issues together as adults, right? When we're inviting and bringing in third parties, bringing in court systems, there's no emotional attunement, value alignment to your particular voice or position in this court case. It's you against the state. And now we have a growing younger generation. Why even procreate? We can have sex all day, but why even take the risk? Because they're learning from the foolish, impulsive decisions we have made, and they're opting out of it. Discernment. Discernment is costing us. Discernment isn't simply having more information, it's the practice of evaluating meaningfully before acting. Biblically, discernment means being able to distinguish between what is true and what is false. what is aligned with God's purposes, and what undermines them. And that is wisdom. That's wisdom. And what is wisdom versus impulse? Hebrews 5:14, 1 John 4:1. It is not cynicism, nor is it blind fear. Discernment is grounded in truth and understanding because it chooses wisely, even under pressure. In this world, your ability to practice discernment, to educate, to slow down, to delay is so important. So important. It doesn't matter what culture, what race, what gender you're coming from, you will be judged based off of your legacy of discerning. How did you handle relationships? How did you handle your finances as a man? Right? Your career. How did you handle your time? In these last days, emotionally, financially, and socially, the risk of deception is real. And many fall not because they are ignorant, but because they act too quickly and without intentional evaluation. The Bible does not call believers to flinch at the world, but to watch, reflect, and choose with insight, to weigh the unseen costs, not just the visible benefits. Discernment protects identity, purpose, and destiny. When you're dealing with humans, fellas, you have to accept that you might piss some people off just off the consequence of being discerning. Maybe instead of you rushing into this relationship with this woman, someone who you clearly see there's a misalignment, or rushing into a financial decision or a purchase, you might make some people uncomfortable. Maybe they want you to be impulsive. Maybe they want you to make a decision right away. But it's not your job to people please at the expense of your well being, at the expense of your peace. You have to value yourself. And some cultures and some races have that stronger than others. I would agree, even to the extent where I even believe the Black community is viewed as an easy target because they know a lot of us are coming from broken homes, a legacy of slavery that has positioned a lot of us in a state of insecurity, low self esteem. So we become easy to market to. A lot of these different sellers and things of that sort, they know which groups are more vulnerable to impulsive purchasing, because in their mind they buy these items and they spend on these particular goods because it's a way for them to win over others in their communities. Okay. 7 areas where people commonly fall into deception. 1, high cost borrowing and debt traps. About 24% of Americans surveyed have used high cost borrowing methods such as payday loans, auto title loans, or rent to own stores in the past 5 years, often paying APRs far above traditional credit rates. Younger borrowers use these methods even more frequently, with about one third, 32 to 35% of those aged 18 to 34, having relied on high cost borrowing. Lower financial literacy strongly predicts high cost borrowing behaviors. 2, repeat borrowing and lack of planning. Studies show that payday borrowers expect to borrow again. The average borrower estimates they have a 70% chance of borrowing again in the next 8 weeks, and the actual probability is consistent with that estimate. This reflects difficulty planning long term financial outcomes and understanding future costs. 3, mortgage and lending risk. While specific national percentages on bad mortgages and mortgage decisions vary, research shows systemic inefficiencies, biases in credit scoring, and widespread mispricing in mortgage lending that disadvantage certain groups financially. These structural issues make it easier for borrowers to enter loans that work against their long term financial stability unless they evaluate the terms carefully. Predatory lending deception. One study of over 3 million loans found that as many as 70% of early payment defaults involve misrepresentations on loan applications, suggesting borrowers often do not fully understand or accurately report their financial situation when pressured into agreements. Impulse buying and shopping addiction. Between 8% and 16% of people show shopping behaviors that resemble loss of self control. And while not all of these are clinically pathological, this pattern mirrors the same impulsive emotional decision dynamics that lead to debt accumulation and remorseful financial commitments. A Consumer Financial Protection Bureau report found that 63% of buy now, pay later borrowers had multiple outstanding loans at once, and nearly two-thirds of such loans went to subprime or deep subprime credit borrowers. These patterns reflect decisions driven by immediate gratification rather than long term affordability. Behavioral research shows that people often make decisions based on cognitive shortcuts like anchoring, optimism bias, or emotional reaction, rather than rational evaluation. Dynamic link to impulsive judgment in financial and other domains. 10 ways that emotions can lead us into a destiny God did not call us for. 1. Fear rushes decisions that wisdom would slow down. Desperation prioritizes immediate relief over long term outcomes. Loneliness attracts relationships that look satisfying, but they lack true alignment. Shame drives compulsive purchases that compound financial risk. Anxiety reduces analytical thinking and increases impulsive choices. Excitement blinds people to hidden costs and long term sacrifice. Attachment wounds disguise unhealthy people or situations as destiny. Stress narrows focus to short term fixes instead of big picture vision. Approval seeking reduces self evaluation and increases conformity. And emotion mistakenly interprets chemistry or urgency as divine direction. So you notice there's a theme here: anxiety, stress, attachment history, injuries, desperation, loneliness. A lot of us who struggle with mental health issues, stress issues, depression, anxiety, tend to be vulnerable in the market of bad impulsive spending, impulsive decision making in relationships. This is what's costing many adults their health as they get into their 40s and their 50s. It's just poor decisions that were made from a space of impulse and not rational thinking. This is why I intentionally delayed making any large purchases, especially mortgages, things like that in my life, because I just knew it was just a bad decision. I'm not fully educated in these areas. I still have a lot to learn. So I did not want to rush into buying a property or investing in a home that I could not afford or I did not understand the terms of the loan for. So important. 10 points on the difference between discernment and paranoia. Discernment seeks truth. Paranoia fears every motive. Discernment evaluates evidence. Paranoia assumes threat without basis. Discernment weighs long term outcomes. Paranoia fixates on worst case scenarios. Discernment remains open to good outcomes with careful evaluation. Paranoia rejects possibility of good as inherently suspicious. Discernment tests alignment with values and purpose. Paranoia treats every option as a trap, regardless of the context. Discernment is grounded in facts and logic. Paranoia is grounded in fear without proportional evidence. Discernment differentiates intuition from anxiety. Paranoia elevates anxiety to proof. Discernment consults wise counsel and patterns. Paranoia isolates and distrusts external perspectives. Discernment pauses before responding. Paranoia reacts defensively without evaluation. Discernment accepts uncertainty with confidence in the process. Paranoia demands certainty and sees danger everywhere. Discernment keeps peace. Paranoia keeps the tension. Yeah, so it's so important in these days as young men for us to just practice discernment and to challenge any thinking that is born out of emotional impulse, desperation, effort to impress other people. Any decision that's made out of a space of impressing others, usually leads to long term worse outcomes. People pleasing does not take into consideration the long term impact on your well being, on your mental health. I lived this life. I made a lot of poor, impulsive financial decisions, from car loans to, rushing into conditions or situations that, only ended up costing me in the long term. And just speaking from experience, it's just so important as a Black community that we're mindful of how we are vulnerable to impulsivity. We are vulnerable to those long term consequences of people pleasing, trying to purchase and buy things to impress other people in our communities because of that hole that we have in ourselves, just from centuries of racism, centuries of oppression. That just makes us more vulnerable in this market. And it may be in your best interest to have a second person review the contracts before you make any big purchases, review the terms, have someone else, you know, who can be a little bit more objective and assist you. If you know you're coming from a background of stress, anxiety, attachment injuries, low self esteem, low self worth, and that stuff hasn't been healed, and now you're going out into the world to make a big purchase, make sure you do your homework and you educate yourself. I'm not saying that just because you had a history of pain that you can't be wise and intelligent. It's just don't make decisions out of that pain. Sometimes it's okay to delay and have a regular car, have a regular vehicle that just gets you from A to B. Sometimes you don't need to have the most fanciest vehicle. That's what I had to learn. Like, I don't need to have the most modern, up to date form of transportation to get where I need to go. Just some things to think about. Hope you guys have a blessed day.